Savannah Moore, a black MMA coach, believed strength was something confined to the cage. But when two imposters posing as federal officers showed up outside her home, cloaked in authority and armed with racial bias, she realized the fight for her existence could breach even the safety of her doorstep. The peace she had built was shattered in an instant, turning her own yard into a battleground where honor, skin color, and courage collided. The morning in Mesa, Arizona, was unnaturally still. Every blade of manicured grass, each pebbled walkway, seemed selected by an invisible committee that approved only what was uniform and bland. Savannah stood on her porch, a coffee mug steaming in her hand, the smell of Arabica and desert dust mixing in the light breeze. Her eyes, narrowed against the rising sun, carried the quiet watchfulness of someone who knew peace was always temporary. Behind her, Noah, her husband, stepped outside, yawning and holding a watering can. His face lit up the moment he saw Savannah, a look that made her feel deeply rooted, despite the neighborhood's polite but persistent reminder that they were outsiders. Noah, a cybersecurity analyst, had a mind wired for logic and a heart that never saw Savannah's blackness as anything but beautiful. They were a contrast that unsettled the neighborhood. A powerful black woman, carved from muscle and resilience, beside a lean, soft-spoken white man. Courteous nods, strained smiles, and small talk that never ventured too deep surrounded them. Savannah had grown used to being the anomaly, her very presence a reminder of a world more honest than the ones these neighbors were raised to believe in. The unease was always there, polite but palpable, whispering from behind trimmed hedges and HOA newsletters. Savannah didn't let it weigh her down. Her resilience had been honed by years of living at the edge of expectations. She didn't have to prove anything to anyone, but she knew the price of appearing too strong, too visible. A memory flickered a neighbor complimenting her strength with an offhand remark about good genes, unaware of the loaded history behind those words. Savannah knew strength wasn't something she was born with. It was something she had earned through sweat, discipline, and enduring the subtle barbs of a world that smiled as it judged. She had hung a modest Black Lives Matter flag on her fence during the protests, only to receive a letter from the HOA 2 days later, citing it as a disruption to community aesthetics. Trump flags still fluttered undisturbed 3 houses down. Savannah didn't respond with rage. She responded with presence, standing taller, loving harder, teaching her students that existence itself, in a world eager to erase you, was an act of defiance. That morning, as the black SUV crept to a halt in front of her yard, Savannah sensed the shift before a single word was spoken. The car lacked plates. A cheap decal reading HOA Enforcement Unit clung crookedly to the door. The first man, stocky and bald, lumbered out, his tactical vest straining against his body. The stitched tag on his chest read D. Hardin. The second man, wiry with a patchy beard and cheap sunglasses, clutched a clipboard like it was a prop in a bad community theater play. His name tag read S. Vance. Noah, still watering the plants, froze mid-pour, his instincts kicking in. Savannah remained composed, coffee still in hand, reading the men the way a fighter reads an opponent's stance, eyes breathing. "Good morning," Vance said, voice stiff. "We've had reports of violations regarding outdoor equipment and landscape compliance." Savannah didn't flinch. She caught the smirk in Hardin's eyes, not the professional detachment of a real inspector, but the sizing up of a target. "If you're here about violations," Savannah said calmly, "you must have seen the political banners 3 houses down. Or is community harmony only disrupted when people who look like me decorate their fences?" The question sliced the morning air sharper than a blade. Hardin's nostrils flared. "I've met your kind before," he growled. "Always playing the victim, blaming the system. You create your own resentment." Noah stepped closer, standing between them. "This is private property. You have no authority here. We're calling the police." Vance waved a laminated card, but Savannah barely glanced. She could tell from the faded eagle logo and bad lamination it was fake. Hardin stepped forward, muscles tense, eyes locked onto Savannah. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist in a move that screamed dominance. But Savannah's body responded on instinct, years of training coiling into a single, fluid motion. She twisted her wrist, pivoted her hips, and locked his arm in a joint-breaking position, forcing him to stumble backward without inflicting damage. She stood her ground on the porch, unshaken, commanding the space with quiet authority. Noah lifted his phone, recording everything. "You just committed assault," he said, his voice clear. "You're on camera." Hardin's face twisted in rage. He reached for a taser strapped under his vest, pointing it at Savannah's chest. Savannah didn't run. She pivoted, sidestepped, and with a precise, grounded kick, struck Hardin squarely in the chest, knocking him onto the patio tiles. The taser clattered harmlessly to the ground. Vance backed toward the SUV, panic in his eyes. "Call the police," Savannah said quietly to Noah, who was already dialing. When real officers arrived minutes later, the two imposters were still floundering. Savannah stood calmly, arms folded, surrounded by neighbors who had emerged from behind their curtains, eyes wide. The officers quickly confirmed the men had no affiliation with any enforcement agency. They were arrested on charges of trespassing, assault, and impersonating officers. But the real victory wasn't the arrests. It was the quiet shift in the air. Neighbors who had once offered only strained smiles now approached Savannah with genuine gratitude. A Latina woman down the street shared how Vance had harassed her teenage son for skateboarding. A retired teacher admitted Hardin had threatened fines over her non-standard garden gnome. The community realized what Savannah had always known: control wrapped in polite language was still control. Savannah and Noah didn't seek media attention. They declined interviews, stayed off viral videos, and simply lived. But the ripples of that morning spread. The HOA leadership was overhauled. New bylaws were enacted, limiting HOA enforcement powers and demanding transparency. Savannah opened free self-defense classes at the local community center. She taught not to hurt, but to defend, to exist without apology. Her motto was simple: you don't have to be a fighter to claim your space. But if someone tries to take it, know how to stand. Savannah Moore never needed a cape, a badge, or viral fame to change her world. She only needed to refuse to move, to hold her ground so that others could find the courage to hold theirs. And in the end, the place that once only tolerated her began to see her truly, see her not as an exception, but as the standard for what a community could become when it finally chose to open its eyes.